everybody. It's November 2nd, 2017, and we're the toughest gamers around. Today I'm joined by Mad Dog Steve, Dirty Dan, I am the Kingpin Noah, and Nancy's Pride and Joy Nick. And if you were listening last week, which will be probably the same day this goes up because I've been a fool and didn't pay my Podbean fee for the month or whatever, you'll know that we are doing a top 20 list of games you should play before you die, like a bucket list of gaming. And there was some confusion during the creation of these lists, like were they supposed to be the games that we were supposed to play before we die, or we just think everyone should play? And it is games every human being should play before they're dead. And usually we jump into the, hey, what have you been playing thing, but I kind of want to do this first. Is that cool?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
definitely.
that's fine with me.
And just, I guess, to set a couple of expectations before we dig into it. One, I think that we kind of generally all liked the idea of our own, bucket list enough to where we'll probably use that either next week or in one of our coming podcasts, kind of like a similar version of this, but games that we've never played through, even though maybe we've always wanted to, or you've expected us to have played through them or something like that. So, I think that'll be another episode in its entirety. But
yeah, like that one will be cool because I think we'll all have very different lists, and so it won't be like run of the mill.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what games people haven't played that you kind of maybe just assume everybody's played. There are a couple big games that you might never know that I didn't play through, even though I play through all kinds of random stuff. Just because I talk about a random game every week doesn't mean that there aren't really big popular games that I haven't gotten around to.
Because he's a slacker.
I really am, and that will come through when we do the next list. But with regards to this one, with the 20 games that you should play before you die, well, really it's 60 games that you, the listener, should play before you die. Possibly less than 60 because we probably have some overlap. We're all going into this blind.
Or more.
Yeah, or more.
There's 4 of us.
Oh, that's math. Okay. 80. 80 games you should play before you die. Possibly less than that because I didn't count myself. Possibly less than that because of overlap. But it is really hard to narrow it down to 20, and even in narrowing it down to 20, there are going to be games or probably even series that don't get mentioned. There are more than 20 games I can think of that you should play before you die, but in the spirit of the list, we narrowed it down to 20. These aren't necessarily representative of, these are not my top 20 favorite games of all time by any means. There is some overlap with that, but not entirely. But just know that it's really hard to put a list like this together, but it's also kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Let's just make lists for the rest of the year. Every podcast will have a list of something.
If BuzzFeed has taught us anything, it's that people want to see lists.
They want to hear them lists.
Yep, list things for me. I'm a human. Organize things for my simple brain so that the electrons can fire accurately.
When I first, I came in to the Bideo a little late. We all miss Tyler. But I remember one of the first episodes I listened to, which was probably one of the first ones, Steve was like, I got that sore spot for top 10s.
I do. I just want to hear people's top 10s.
Alright, so I think the way I want to do this, personally, is I would like to we go around in a circle, and we list our number 20 through our number 11 first. I don't know if you guys, ordered them in any way?
I did not order mine at all. I just kind of put them all on the list.
I did not order mine specifically because it's not a favorite games list, so
yeah,
I don't think of any one of these in particular as more important than the other.
Okay, I put the last half of mine are the games you should play definitely, but not the number 1 through 5.
Yeah, I think you can order them however you want. If you want to build some dramatic tension into the last ones that you list as like the big heavy hitters, the final boss games, you can go right for it. Mine are pretty random, just kind of based on how they came into my brain and as I went through my games room and was looking at my shelves, the order that they appeared on my shelves. So they might be in some cases lumped by system here and there, but not really.
All right, man. I feel really bad for some games that I just did not get on this list.
I'm going to save a little tiny section at the end just as like a kind of a cheat honorable mentions to let you know of some particularly painful ones that I had to leave out if they don't show up.
All right. So I'll start and I'll pick a dude. Let's get right into it. Number 20 is a game you would not think I would put on this list, but it is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.
Oh boy.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
When I think of like the modern shooter, that is like the best version of it that I've ever played. Like the best campaign and more importantly the best multiplayer experience I've ever had in like the 360 era and sooner. So kind of hard that you can't go and play the multiplayer for that game back in the prime of when that multiplayer was good, but that game overall is really well crafted.
Yeah, even the campaign was just like, ooh, real good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big Call of Duty fan, but I remember playing that one and being like blown away. And that's why it made it on the list.
That game was basically all our friends group played for months. No matter where you'd go, anyone's house to hang out, there'd be one or two TVs that both were playing Modern Warfare 2 on rotation, and people would just be handing the controller off and constantly hopping into new games. So it's a really good one.
Yeah, like I've got Modern Warfare, World War II coming in the mail tomorrow, and the only reason I got that is because I want to specifically relive that game as best I can. And since that's like the newest one that's coming out, I'm gonna actually play a multiplayer game that's active or has an active community.
All right. Number 19. This one hurts, but I picked Skyrim. I was going through Bethesda games in my head, and even though this is not my favorite, like, kind of really not my favorite, I feel like it's a good interpretation of what a Elder Scrolls game really is, and everyone has already played it, so if you haven't played it, you should maybe go do so.
That's one of them that there are some games that when I was thinking of this list, I thought of like, what are those like pillar games that you would expect to see at the top of like everyone's favorite games list or the top of like 100 most influential games of all time, those types of things. Like
that sweet Game Informer list.
Yeah, like I was just gonna say, like that Game Informer list of top 100 RPGs. There's like a handful that you'd always expect to see at the top of that list. And Skyrim is one of those games that is just like so well loved that.
In fact, wasn't Skyrim number 1 on that list?
Yeah, I think it was.
In my heart, the real Elder Scrolls is Morrowind. I'm sorry, Steve.
I mean, everyone's heart can have a disease.
Noah, did you play Morrowind like when it was out? Okay. I understand and forgive you.
I was such a young like high school kid, and I was like, oh, it was so good. But now I can definitely see why people do not like it.
The Xbox version doesn't do that game any justice beyond what the game already does for itself. So.
Yeah. So next on this list, number 18 is Devil May Cry 3.
Ooh.
I'm a big fan of the series, and I've played all of them, but I have not beaten 4, I think. And I would say Devil May Cry 3 is the best one of them, so you should probably go play that one. And I don't think you really need to know a lot about 1 and 2 to play 3. Like, I think you'll understand it enough. So that's why I picked it.
It's pretty well standalone. This is, I guess, spoilers for my list. And I'll say this because I don't think anyone else would have this on theirs. But I was very close. One of my honorable mention games you should play that didn't make my list was Bayonetta. And so Devil May Cry 3 kind of fits into that same slot of just incredibly smooth, fluid, visually impressive, over the top action.
Yeah, man. I can see why Bayonetta would be there, but for me, I personally prefer Devil May Cry over Bayonetta, but not by a lot. So was it 17 I'm on or something like that?
Yeah, why don't you do two more? You'll do 5 of yours, and then we'll hand it off, and we'll kind of go in chunks of 5.
All right. The next one is Kingdom Hearts.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Go on.
I think Kingdom Hearts was really good. I personally would rather play 2 than 1, but I feel like if you had to play 1 before you died, you should play the first one. Yeah, I just thought it was a really good game.
But then you'll miss out on all that Organization 13 lore.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think you're okay without all that.
If I got to choose, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 would both be on here.
Kingdom Hearts, I think for me, the first one inspired more childlike wonder and majesty that I remember.
That was definitely a vivid game for me growing up, I guess. It was instrumental in helping to form my tastes, even though when I think of the series overall, I don't dislike Kingdom Hearts at all. I like Kingdom Hearts games, but I don't have any particularly strong affection for Kingdom Hearts. I'm never really, really anticipating the next Kingdom Hearts game, and I'm definitely gonna go out and buy it day one and can't wait to play it. It's just man, Kingdom Hearts is it's like a comfy blanket, especially the first one. It'd be really easy to just tuck back in and play a little Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, I don't think I played the first one until the second one came out, and I just sat down and I just played through both of them with no breaks.
Even if you don't play Kingdom Hearts, at least go download the MP3 for Simple and Clean off of LimeWire.
And so my last one for now is going to be Batman Arkham Asylum.
Yes, and that's one that I wanted to say, and then I left it off, so thank you for covering it.
Yes, you're welcome, Steve, and you're welcome, Leah.
Very much.
I believe she is also a huge fan of the Arkham games, especially Asylum, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, there's a bunch of Arkham games, but Asylum captures being Batman the best. I don't know how to say it. But you're put in a small area. It's not even small. You're put in this area where you're surrounded by bad guys all the time, and each room is a new puzzle of how to take down a person or a boss battle. The combat is really fluid and good, and there's just puzzles and collectibles, and it's just a good time. You're just Batman.
If nothing else, that game defined how third-person brawler action combat would work for every game since its release. Every game in the last 10 years has played a clone of Arkham Asylum. Shadow of War plays like that. If I played other modern games, I would be able to name more, but it's definitely the go-to combat style.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that does it for my last 5 games. Steve, your turn.
Oof, okay. So one of the things that we were kind of discussing before this episode is how you, in a way, want to kind of avoid maybe picks that you think someone else is going to pick. Not that you want to game the system, but since there are so many good games out there, if you're confident someone else is going to pick something, you can risk leaving it off in order to put one of your other suggestions in. But this first game,
I gamed on that hard.
this first game is not one of those. I feel like I'm doing everyone else on this call a service by selecting it myself, and that is Chrono Trigger. So,
You know we didn't put it on there.
It's true. We talked about this.
this is true. Although I don't know if Nick ever specifically said if he did or not. But anyways, Chrono Trigger is like, there are actually, considering how many I play, there are not as many RPGs on my list as you'd expect to see. Because in some cases I tried to sort of choose the best in genre for each genre of games so that you can get a fairly diverse list. And there are a couple other games that you could put right up there with Chrono Trigger, but man, Chrono Trigger is just like the perfect role-playing game. It's got everything that you would want. It looks really good. It sounds really good. The combat is interesting and it's fast-paced. All the characters are interesting. The stories, like the perfect blend of interesting and heartfelt, but also funny. There's good pacing to the game. It's just so solid all around. So definitely play Chrono Trigger. Don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that.
I mean, those are basically my thoughts too, and that's why I was like, I bet you Steve's gonna put this game on his list, and I don't have to say anything about it then, because he's gonna say everything for me.
Boo. No, it's true, and that's a smart move, and hopefully that made room for other good games for you.
I'll tell you now, mine is full of RPGs, because that's almost all I play.
I mean, mine is too. I said there's not as many RPGs. I mean, mine probably still has like 5 to 7 RPGs, but it's not 18 RPGs. So my second game is Mario 64, and we kind of had like I guess it was official, but I think we all maybe have broken it a little bit here and there. So it's sort of like a house rule, unofficial rule, that we would not include multiple games from the same series or from the same franchise. I think you could probably make a case for like a 2D and a 3D Mario game. But when I thought about all the Mario games, what Mario 3D game did I want to put on the list? Or what 3D platformer did I want to put on the list? I had to go with Mario 64 because I think that even as a first entry for the console and for Nintendo, it is just like a perfect playing game. Like, the controls are so flexible and easy to pick up, but you can do so much, and like you can move around those levels in so many different ways depending on how familiar you are with the controls. And it's just so well paced and so interesting to explore that castle for the first time. So even though it's not as pretty as future Mario games, and if we get around to games we've been playing, you could draw a lot of good comparisons to Mario Odyssey, which just came out. Although I think I might be the one that played that. But anyways, Mario 64 is very good.
That's why it's number 2 on my list.
Ah, boom. First official snipe off of your list. If I know you, there's probably another Mario game on your list, which I specifically left off of mine.
It's sad because it's off of mine too now.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
It was replaced like 2 minutes before we started.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess number 3 is going to be... So, maybe I'm already breaking the rule. So I wanted to try to stick to one Mario game, but I was like, Mario is so influential and kind of best in genre for whatever it's trying to do, 2D or 3D in a lot of cases. So I didn't feel quite as bad putting a second Mario game on my list, especially because the second one that I chose is Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2.
Ooh, interesting.
Because I think that game technically is probably the most impressive looking Super Nintendo game. But more importantly than that, even though it came out 20 years ago, it's got a visual style that still holds up and looks incredibly unique today. It is a platformer that plays unlike any other platformer that has come out since, other than maybe other Yoshi games. And it's just full of like little technical tricks, small little charming like nonsense things. And I don't know, like whenever I think of games that give me like the good feelings, like, oh, what are those games that are just like so charming that you can't help yourself? I think of Yoshi's Island. And I do think that it is the best 2D Mario game, even though if my girlfriend listens to this and hears me not saying Super Mario World, I might be single soon. I still think that is the case.
When you said Yoshi's Island or whatever, I immediately thought of the the noise that when you transform Yoshi into like a helicopter or whatever.
Yep.
Like, oh, it just was in my head playing.
That's good. That means that you remember good games.
Mm-hmm. I would agree that it goes on a list.
Good. It's so good. Okay, so number 4, and this, I would be a sham if this wasn't on my list, because this came up on the last podcast and was the whole reason that this idea was generated. And number 4 is Undertale.
Interesting.
So there are not a ton of RPGs on my list, and the reason Undertale is one of them on my list, even though you look at this list and you'll be like, there are some all-time greats that you're leaving out, Steve. What the heck? Is that Undertale is kind of like the farthest stretch in the opposite direction from Chrono Trigger that you can take a turn-based RPG or an RPG and still make it fit within that mold. Like, it plays completely differently. It plays completely unique. It's got a story unlike any other role-playing game that you're going to play. But it still like hits a lot of the other high marks that you'd want. It still has great music. It still has a great cast of characters. It still has like a really strong pull to get you through the story and have you see the endings. And it does a great job in shaping the story in some ways based on the decisions that you make. So even though it has been talked to death, and I think that maybe people are still sort of in the backlash of it, where it was incredibly popular and then people got burnt out on hearing about it, I do think that like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it'll be one of those games that people talk about incredibly fondly and be like, man, Undertale was doing something special. Plus, that's my way of guilting Dan into playing it instead of just watching it on a speedrun marathon.
Maybe someday.
Probably not.
I have it downloaded. I played it for like an hour.
Well, you only need to play for 3 more hours and you're done.
Yeah, I'll get around to it. I got other stuff on my plate first.
These are good responses to a top 20 list. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe
Got about an hour into it.
it was all right.
I still got to play it, obviously.
And then
before I die, right? I got plenty of time.
Oh yeah, dude, you're good. You're like only a third of the way there. You're only a third dead. All right, last game on my list, last of my 5, not on my list, but last of my first 5, is another game that die-hard fans of the Bideo will recognize because it topped our Game of the Year 2016 list.
What?
And that is The Witness.
Interesting.
So I thought that there had to be a puzzle game on this list because I was trying in some ways to represent genres. And kind of the go-to answer is Tetris, right? Like that's the game everybody would point to as like a must-play puzzle game. I think that The Witness is so unique and so good at teaching at forcing you to teach yourself. Like no other game has made me feel as smart as The Witness, and no other game has made me like scratch my head as much as The Witness. And it's got multiple different layers of how you teach yourself and how you view the world changing over the course of your playthrough. And it uses like every single piece of the game machine to create like just this really intelligently designed game that there is absolutely nothing else like. For anyone that has never seen The Witness or heard of The Witness before, look it up. It has an incredible visual style, but don't just think that it is like a 2D line and dot game, because there is 3D elements to it. But yeah, to just take the concept of like a grid with lines and dots and just adding a few symbols, making a bunch of different combinations and like a million different puzzle styles. I feel so smart when I play it. That I know I already said that, but like that's the thing that I always come back to is I feel like a genius when I play The Witness and solve puzzles in The Witness. And so that's my first 5. I'm going to throw it to Nick.
All right. Well, when I was coming up with mine, I think a lot of us didn't actually put it into any particular order. Just kind of whatever bubbled to my brain. First one for me is Perfect Dark. So it's an N64 game, but if you have yourself a 360 and can get it on the arcade, that plays real smooth. And from the era, like everyone knows GoldenEye and how legendary that was, but Perfect Dark was just better. It was made by the same people. It had the same like feel to it, but it was just like more polished. It had like a really cool campaign that was really fun and interesting and had like good characters and a good story. And then the multiplayer, like you could customize like every aspect of your matches. And like it's just a superb game. It's got like fun like time trials to do, and you can get cheats by doing the levels really quickly. And it's just a pinnacle of shooters, I think.
It is, and it is on my list. So I thought really hard about whether or not to do GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. I went back and forth, and I basically, for the same reasons as you, where I landed on Perfect Dark on the thought that GoldenEye is probably the game that is more fondly remembered, and GoldenEye is the game that I think more people have memories of. But the two games are so similar, and I do think the Perfect Dark is just a better crafted game. It is just more interesting. The levels are more intelligently put together. The objectives are more varied, and yeah, it's just edges it out. It's like a better sequel almost.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best shooters ever made. But yes, get the 360 arcade version. It has no lag and it plays so well.
The second game I put on there was Grand Theft Auto 5. This was a tough choice for me because I really liked 3 and I liked San Andreas quite a bit, but 5, it plays just as well as any of those old games or older games. And like it had like interesting characters and it was just really fun. And so in terms of that series, and a lot of like open sandbox games like Grand Theft Auto 5 is a must play. It's so good.
Yeah, I felt like maybe I should have put 3 on there, but I'm glad to see that you represented this in some way.
Let's see. And then, for the third game I picked was Shadow Hearts for the PlayStation 2. That was an RPG. It has a very, what's the word I'm thinking of? Macabre and, it's not supernatural, but it's got a lot of like monsters and demons and stuff. And the battle system was really interesting because instead of just like choosing things from a menu and then your character performing that, you had to spin this like ring and you had to time your like X clicks right. Almost like you're playing like Mario Golf and you're trying to like get your swing into those zones. Like that's how you had to battle, was like spinning that ring. And that had just a really good story, and it was very fun and like visually appealing. And if you play that game, you're gonna be super excited because there's 2 more Shadow Hearts games that you get to play. Which,
And
Shadow
if you
Hearts,
really want to dig into it, there's that other one on PlayStation.
Oh yeah,
that's
Kodelka.
Kodelka.
And I had a hard time picking between Shadow Hearts and Shadow Hearts Covenant, the sequel. Because Covenant like was just like a more polished version of the first one in a lot of ways. But again, like if you play that first game and you love it, like you're probably going to keep going. So I wanted to put that one on there.
Good one.
Number 4 for me, I put Disgaea, Hour of Darkness.
Better take that off my list.
I've played that game to death, and it's so good. It's the first one in the series. It comes in a couple different formats. You can get it on the PlayStation 2 or the PSP or on PC. But I'm gonna say the DS version is maybe the best. It's portable, which is a plus. You do lose some like voice acting, which sucks. But it has like all the content from some of the other versions, like some special New Game Plus modes. And it's just, for tactics RPGs, it's hard not to go with Final Fantasy Tactics as like the pinnacle of that genre. But for me, the like comedy and the fun mood that this guy has is just so good. And so I had to put that one on my list. It's a personal favorite.
That's one that I left off mine specifically on the assumption that you would cover a Disgaea game for me.
Number 1 isn't my favorite, but I still put it on the list because I think it's an amazing entry to a great series.
Mm-hmm.
And you pretty much just said everything I was gonna say, so yeah. I guess I just won't talk about it.
And then my 5th game I put on was Golden Sun. And
you son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch. And I've actually there's 3 games in that series now, and I've actually only beaten the first one. And so that's the only one I have the rights to put on my list. But, like, that game was maybe one of the best Game Boy Advance entries. It was just as fleshed out an RPG as any you'll play, and it's got really good characters, and the magic system was really fun using the Dijin, and the graphics were really good and had amazing music. Just Golden Sun is so good. Go play it.
I
I
really
still
would.
play it like once a year.
I really would echo the sentiment that Golden Sun looks incredible. Like the animation and the art direction for a Game Boy Advance is just out of this world. I have no idea how they managed to make that happen on a GBA. So
I know,
it's worth it for that reason alone.
Like, if you have access to a Game Boy player, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
it looks amazing on the big screen. So, a true testament to the
Pretty
Game
sure
Boy
it's
Advance.
on the Virtual Console these days.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose. So, Dan, what do you got for us?
Well, my haphazardly placed list here. I've got 5 strong ones that we'll save for the end, but the rest of them are kind of all over. So we'll just start from the top of my list here. And the first one, or the last one, however you want to look at it, that I threw on here was Diablo 2. Because while I didn't quite get into it during its heyday, I did still play a lot of it. And it's just got the fact that it's still played so much today, and it still has so much relevance, even when Diablo 3 is out, I think speaks a lot to that. Like, that you need to play that game. There's still plenty of online activity with it, like Blizzard still updates the servers for it, and I think they still like refresh the seasons every once in a while too, which is crazy for such an old game.
That was on my list until right before the podcast, and I swapped it out for something else and moved it to honorable mentions. So good call putting that game on.
Yeah, so good. The next one down is Half-Life 2. I think the first game I played when I built a computer back in high school was Half-Life 2. And episodes 2 and 3, or episode 2, or, the extra pieces of it as well. Just everything about that game was just so amazing to run through and just kind of see and experience that whole story. And of course, everyone will continue to be sad that the third one will never be. But, we just got to enjoy what we have,
Mm-hmm. It did a lot to kind of reshape how stories were told in games. That was one of the first games I remember where you were kind of seeing it just from this one guy's perspective, and there wasn't a lot of cutting away to cutscenes to tell you the story and things like that. You were like in the story, playing it as it happened, which obviously is, I think, a much more popular storytelling style now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was some pretty amazing stuff. Let's see. Next on the list then is a more recent game, and that is Valhalla, the bartending simulator storytelling game. All the characters in it were really good. The music was amazing. I highly recommend it for anybody. I mean, that's why it's on this list, just to experience that story that's for just a visual novel game is done extremely well, because there's lots of bad visual novel games out there.
There are.
And the like interaction between like the bartender that you're playing as and all the different characters and just the different directions it can go because of varying factors adds a lot of depth to it, which I like.
Dan, you know what?
What?
You put on some games that I maybe would have and would not have put on my top 20 list. Half-Life 2 and Diablo 2 definitely should be on that list.
Well, you're just increasing my need to play Valhalla too. That one might show up on my other list. The top 20 games you feel bad for not having played.
That one like recently came into view for me, and it's definitely getting purchased the next Steam sale.
Good man. And if you feel like it, the other game in the same universe is Read Only Memories. That didn't make it on my list, but it's a pretty good one. Let's see. Next we have Radiant Historia. I just played that one recently. Having only ever seen it and never thought to pick it up. Steve highly recommended that one to me, so I picked it up and I played through it, and I was just completely blown away. Like with the storytelling and the music is super good, even though it's a fairly limited soundtrack. The music was really well done, and the combat was different than your typical 3-party RPG with the pushing and the pulling and shoving enemies around to increase your damage. I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, that is. I mean, for a non-franchised game, like for just a single standalone IP, like the first shot out of the gate, it's so good. Anyone that has a DS should play that. And actually, as I was putting together my list, I hovered over it, and I whispered a little prayer up into the air, hoping that someone else, specifically you, Dan, would mention Radiant Historia, so I could fit other stuff on my list. So I'm glad to see it here because 100%. If you're a fan of any kind of role-playing game at all, you'll definitely get something out of Radiant Historia. It blows me away.
And then the fifth game on my list then is gonna be again, this is a more recent one. Trails of Cold Steel. It's a bit of a slow game, but the story, once it gets going, really pulled me into it, and the gameplay was really good. And it's tough to say to just play one of them because honestly, both of them together is one giant game. They both play the same. The story continues immediately after 1 to 2, but to make for the second one to make sense, you have to play the first one. So that's why I say the first one. Gets you into all the characters and stuff. But yeah, that's the first 5 I've got for you. So I guess we're going back to Noah.
Man, Dan, you have some games on your list. Where were your Super Metroids, man?
Maybe they're somewhere else on my list. I still have 15 more.
I guess. But some of those aren't on my list. It feels weird.
That's fine. They don't have to be on.
They weren't
on
even considerations. All right, so we'll start with Stardew Valley. The reason I picked this one is because I definitely would recommend a Harvest Moon game to people. And the issue with that is that Stardew Valley is made by one man who captured everything you wanted about Harvest Moon in his own game. I can't recommend it enough. Stardew Valley is so good, and it fixed a lot of nagging issues I had with the other Harvest Moon, like the Harvest Moon series in general. He added combat like they did with Rune Factory. There's marriage to all sorts of different people. You can marry the same sex. There's plenty of activities to do. He added different farm maps, so after you finish your first playthrough, you can go through and play your house will be on a haunted, not haunted, but monsters will appear at night on your farm. Or there will be lots of plots of water where you're fishing and you get different fish and you don't have as much room to farm your actual crops. So that's really cool, and I hear they're making a multiplayer mod for it, so you'll be able to play with your friends maybe sometime.
Can I go mess up their farm?
I don't know. I don't know how the multiplayer is actually going to work. I don't know if you're just married and then you have to have the farm together or what the deal is. But yeah, Stardew Valley is the best Harvest Moon that never was. So, big recommendations. if you're ever going to play a Harvest Moon or a Rune Factory or Story of Seasons or whatever, I would pick Stardew Valley. It's probably cheaper and just super good, and it's on consoles and Steam.
It's on the Switch.
It's on everything. Go play it, please. Steve, top 10 games before you die. Please.
I am very interested in playing through Stardew Valley. I actually picked up the PS4 version not that long ago. I just love the story of how that game came to be, how the guy was just a fan of Harvest Moon games, and he was like, they never make a Harvest Moon game the way I want them to be played, so I'll just make one that is as good as the old ones, or maybe even better.
It is. My favorite Harvest Moon was for the PlayStation, and I would even say Stardew Valley is better than that. Like, I remember reading an article a few months ago about some guy who actually quit his job and went to go be a farmer. Probably didn't work out well for that guy. I don't know how much knowledge he had about farming. Next up is conflicting games. I would say Sonic 2. And in parentheses next to it, I have Sonic Mania. Sonic 2 has always been my favorite Sonic game. And the issue with this is, like, that is what I consider the most perfect iteration of Sonic. But then Sonic Mania came out like a few months ago, and is also the perfect iteration of Sonic. So I wasn't sure which one to put here. But I did choose Sonic 2 with Sonic Mania getting a little mention here. Because it does have a lot of the levels from Sonic 2 in it also. But yeah, I feel like that's self-explanatory. I don't need to really go into detail about that.
Yeah, I mean, Sonic Mania doesn't exist without Sonic 2, so it makes sense to pick Sonic 2. Also, Sonic 2 was on my list.
Ooh. Next up is Shadow of the Colossus. Scratch that off your list now, boys.
Dang it.
I figure a lot of people had this one, but it's so good, man. Like, some games make you
There's
feel...
a reason it's being remade again.
Yeah, was it like the third time or fourth time now? There was like
I thought it was just the second time, because there was the PS3 HD release, and then now the PS4 one.
Wasn't there like an HD...
Yeah, that's the PS3 one.
Is it?
Uh-huh. I think the other ones were just ports. Anyway.
Games, feelings. Usually when I play a game, I'm aware it's a game. Like, I'm playing for the experience points, and fire goes against wood enemies. But like, riding around on your horse, killing little lizard things, and hunting down the giant colossi, and climbing them, and stabbing them in the foreheads and whatnot, was, felt really good. I feel like I'm not eloquent enough to really do this game justice.
I think it's lost a little bit in modern times because it doesn't seem quite as special if you are keeping up with games, but the sense of scale that you got when you played that game for the first time was really unique. Until that point, there weren't very many games where you felt like this little tiny person taking on this like huge challenge in front of you. Now, I don't know, games are more technically advanced. They can render more stuff on screen at one time, and they have more like QTEs and cutscenes and stuff, so it's a lot more common to see. But back then, like the first time you walked up to one of those colossi and you realized you had to literally climb all the way up it, and it's just like this huge lumbering, just like building basically. It was It was really cool.
Mm-hmm. And like falling off of them too is like so devastating.
Devastating, yeah.
You have to climb all the way back up, and
especially the last one, the sorcerer.
It's such a battle. It feels so epic. I don't like the word, but if I had to describe it, Shadow of the Colossus is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up is... It's one I wasn't sure I was going to put on this list, but I would say Metal Gear Solid 3. This one is my favorite of the Metal Gear series. Metal Gear Solid 5 isn't bad, though. I think that would be next up. The issue I had with this is 1 is also really super influential, but I found everything about 3 was really good. And I think you can play 3 without having played the first one, because it's essentially a different...
It takes place before.
Yeah, it's like a prequel.
Yeah.
But if you do play the first one, you'll see familiar faces and whatnot.
Some references and stuff, yeah.
I really liked it, and I really liked the ending. I think it's the best of the series, and I think it's objectively the best. And you should play it before you die.
I mean, you do get a crocodile hat.
You do.
Great game. Great game, great theme song.
Disgaea was also in here, but is no longer. So let's just keep going in the same circle. Steve, what do you got?
All right, next up, get ready to scratch a couple off your list, boys. My first is Super Metroid.
Ha! Wasn't on my list because of that.
It was my number 1.
Obviously, the like Castleroid genre, the sort of 2D platform, non-linear exploration style game has blown up. But despite the millions that have come out since, I still think that Super Metroid is the best of them. And I think when people think of the best in class for this genre, they think of either Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night. And I personally am a bigger fan of...
Oh my god, what happened?
What happened there? I personally am a bigger fan of Super Metroid than I am of Symphony of the Night, so I went with Super Metroid. But I don't know, like the music is great. The sense of place is just out of this world for Super Metroid. Like it does such a good job of making you feel like you're alone on like this spooky, desolate planet. And it just plays perfectly. It's hard to succinctly describe a game like Super Metroid other than that it's really good, but I don't know why. What else were your thoughts, Noah, on why it's number 1 on your list?
Honestly, so my list is essentially a best 10 and then the 10 after it. So it wouldn't actually be my real number 1, but yeah, it's like you said, it's still the best. It's like one of the pillar games, like they are up there, like Super Metroid, Super Mario 64, and some other games on my list that we'll have to wait till we get to. Everything about it is just good. Like the sense of, yeah, you're alone on a planet is what makes me feel like Metroids are supposed to be, and it was so just, oh, Mamma Mia, so good.
Very, 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 very true. All good points. That is definitely one of the top 20 games that you should play before you die. Top 80 games. Maybe like 70 at this point. All right. Next one. Dan, get ready to scratch one off your list. I put Persona 4.
Not on my list.
Oh my god. So, I think that you'd be... When you think of games that go onto a list like this, you think of a couple different things. You think of either this, like, really set the groundwork for how games in this genre, or how an entire genre itself plays, or you think of games that kind of like culturally took everybody by surprise, or you think of games that are sort of like offshoots of a genre that created like a new version of something that already existed. And that last one is what Persona 4 is. And really, I could have put Persona 3 or Persona 4 on here. I haven't played 5 yet, so I wouldn't know. But I think that Persona 4 has a little bit more mass appeal. The dungeons are more varied, and the game overall is a little bit sillier. And the cast of characters in Persona 4 is unreal. Like, there is never, almost never, I shouldn't say never, there has very rarely been as well defined a cast of characters where all of them have their good moments, all of them are funny, they're all unique, there aren't a ton of tropes. And then on top of that, the story, the mystery that pulls you through Persona 4 is really good. It's a huge game. You're going to get a ton of like bang for your buck, I guess you could say. And just like oozes visual style too. So if you're a fan of RPGs or you're just a fan of good stories and good characters, there's a lot to love about Persona 4. Also true of 3 to some extent, so really you can't go wrong either way. But 4 is the one to call out. Alright, next up, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3.
Oh, damn.
So, I'm very glad to hear that this is on your list, Nick. It means that you're an intelligent human being. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is like the perfect it's like the perfect version of what it wants to be. There very rarely is a game like a Tony Hawk game or an extreme sports game or an arcadey sports game. Like, I could literally not think of anything to change about Tony Hawk 3 to make it better. Like, it is bordering on perfect for what it wants to do. And every level is like really well designed. There's tons of stuff to find. It has a huge variance in terms of how you can score, based on your skill level. And it's just a really accommodating game to the player. Like, you can watch someone do high score challenges where they score like hundreds of millions of points in 1 2-minute session. And then you can also watch like the speed run of the game, which is like 3 minutes long because you can do everything incredibly fast. So, I think a lot of people in our like late 20s, early 30s age range grew up on Tony Hawk, and maybe some younger listeners or younger people didn't play much Tony Hawk, or maybe only the later ones. But going back to Tony Hawk 3, like, really shows you the peak of that genre and the peak of that arcade sports game. It's just phenomenal. Is there anything you needed to add on to that, Nick?
I was just gonna say, like, the first 2 games were very good, but like you just got that feeling in 3 where like those developers learned everything they needed to, and then they just like, here's our crown jewel.
Yep, like here's every lesson we've ever learned combined with an increase in technology, and we'll just knock it out of the park first try. And
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Steve, go.
Oh, I was going to say that after Tony Hawk 3, there's like 8 Tony Hawk games that all try to be as good as 3 and never hit that point again. So,
yeah. So I, being in my late 20s, early 30s, did play some Tony Hawk games, and most of my memories come from swapping controllers with my brothers, playing that game, just doing everything. Really good.
Yep, same. I remember like sitting, like handing the controller off, playing it at Nick's house when we were in middle school. Like that was a big game for us. But I think it holds up today. I think I could go play it right now and it still would feel great.
I kind of want to.
All right, so I got 2 more in this chunk. Next up is Rez. And I picked Rez because I really wanted to put a rhythm game on here. Thought, well, what's the best rhythm game? It's going to be Donkey Konga. And so I put Donkey Konga on here, but then I was like, I should actually take Donkey Konga off because you need to have a peripheral. And I went with Rez instead. But Rez is, especially if you have like the updated PS4 version, it is like one of the most well realized, super stylized, artistic games that I've ever played, and I really like anytime a game has music that lines up to the gameplay itself. So as you play through, it kind of feels like this complete experience. And especially when it came out, but even today, there's not like anything better feeling than going through a res level and like perfectly hitting all the enemies and like the music building and matching exactly what you're doing as you move through the level, like in time to the beat. And God, it just looks so good, and the soundtrack is so good. So yeah, go play Rez. And then last here, so every list probably has a Final Fantasy game on it. It's hard to pick just one, but I went with Final Fantasy IX.
I knew you were going to pick that one.
And you can kind of follow my logic if you know me, but
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of good Final Fantasy games out there. And it's hard to talk about games that you absolutely should play without mentioning Final Fantasy, because obviously Final Fantasy is very big and very genre defining. Normally I would have said 6. I kind of made the educated guess someone else might. I think that the popular opinion would maybe be 7. But I think the Final Fantasy 9 is a better game than Final Fantasy 7. I think the characters are better. I love the soundtrack in 9. It looks great for a PS1 game. And more than any other RPG that I have listed here, it's just like, without going back to like the NES era, it is just like the best version of a no frills turn-based role-playing game. Like, you just take turns, you attack, sometimes you build up kind of like a over limit type bar.
You always build up that over limit bar.
This is true. You like the it doesn't have like a hook, I guess, or like a gimmick, or like a defining mechanic to the game. It's just like good, pure, like quality RPG gameplay, good, pure quality RPG setting, really funny, and yeah, it's just it is a complete package, and it really delivers basically in every regard. So if you're gonna play a Final Fantasy game, I would highly encourage you to either play or give a second chance to Final Fantasy IX. And from there, I think we'll kick it back over to Nick for his next set.
Oh yeah, 9 was a good choice, and I feel like you could almost make an argument. Like, I know we're trying to avoid picking 2 games in the same series, but just the look and feel of playing a 2D RPG versus a 3D RPG, you could almost maybe both 6 and 9.
I agree. I don't think you can put 6, 9, and Chrono Trigger though. It feels like then you're starting to just get to like your favorite RPGs list.
Yes. Yeah. So my first one is in this set is Silent Hill 2. I'm not a huge fan of survival horror games. I know, Steve, you love them so much. I
do.
But the Silent Hill series is one that I actually took the time to play. I played 1, 2, and 3, and they were all really good and worth putting on these lists. 3 in a lot of ways I think was even better than 2. But 2 was so good. If you're gonna start playing some Silent Hill games, I think that's even maybe the best place to start too. If you play 2 and you love it, 3 is one of those ones where it kind of plays the same because they both came out on the PS3 or PS2, and so technically they weren't drastically different. So they feel very similar. Those
2
are just,
was on my list.
Yeah.
It
They're
is
just-
so good.
and they had like the multiple or different endings, and you could play different skill levels. So if you are like super good at combat, you can scale it down, which you shouldn't. Just fight those zombies. Next on my list was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. So kind of went
Nice
through that
try.
already. It's just a great game. Next up after that is one that I am pretty confident will only be on my list. But I played this game to death, and I think it deserves to be on everyone's future lists.
Can I make an educated guess?
Yes.
Is it Kerbal Space Program?
It's Kerbal Space Program.
I knew it.
So if you haven't heard of it, it's a simulation game where you can build rockets and send these little green dudes off into space. It's kind of like a mirror of our solar system, and so you have like an Earth type planet. There's a red Mars type planet. There's moons, gas giants, and a sun, and asteroids and stuff. But the interesting thing about this game is the physics are very accurate, and so like as you're playing this game, you're like actually learning a little rocket science. Like you got to learn your delta V's and how to do a Humming transfer, which is using like your orbit arcs to go from one celestial body to another. And it's all very cartoony though, which is great. Like it's not realistic or shiny. It's just these little green guys, and you build silly little rockets. And like the best part is your failures in this game. It's like you build this rocket and you're like, all right, this is going to be awesome. And then you put it on the launch pad and you're like, all right, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to hit spacebar, and then it just blows up. And you're like, oh, what did I do?
I like seeing the fail videos and fail clips of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And when I first started playing it, there was no career mode. There were no points. You just got your parts and you could explore. There was no like incentive or guide or anything. And because the game was still in alpha. And as they added things, there was like a science mode where you could go out and you could like do experiments with parts on your ship or do exploration. You get like science points, and you could spend the science points on better parts because you would just start with a limited selection. Then they added like a career mode where you actually have to consider your money and doing missions and stuff. And so the game got pretty fleshed out. And so if you want a game to like really be creative in, it's a great choice. And I think all y'all should try it. Next up is one that might come up on other people's lists. And this is a game I played this year, pretty recently, was Tales of Vesperia. I haven't played all the games in the Tales of universe. I think I've played and beaten 3 of them so far: Vesperia, Symphonia, and Destiny. But
Destiny, I'd like to hear that.
Tales of Destiny, and Symphonia makes a lot of those like top RPGs lists. But I think I liked Vesperia more. It was like just what I needed at the time, and it's a really great RPG, has a really great story, really fun combat. It looks great, like it's a early era Xbox 360 game, and it's 2017 right now. And I played it on my big TV, and the cell shading like doesn't age poorly. It looks real nice, and the characters are really fun. You get to have your waifus and Bodhi Blastias and fun words like that. But it's good.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
still
It
haven't
is very,
played it.
very good.
Not having an Xbox, can't play it because we never got that PS3 version.
The magical like international ones or
Uh-huh.
something like that. Mm-hmm.
Because of the restrictions that were on it, exclusivity rights and all that jazz.
Damn jazz. Otherwise, my last game was Advance Wars for the Game Boy
Good
Advance.
choice.
It's a little tactical game where you build tanks and little infantrymen, and you are on a grid, and you just have to fight other guys with little tanks and infantrymen. But it's really cartoony in the best ways. It's like bright and colorful, and the characters are really fun. And you get like CO, your commanding officer, will like have powers ups that you can use every once in a while, and each commanding officer that you play as has like advantages and disadvantages. So that throws more complexity into the game. And it spawned some sequels that were really good. Like I had a hard time picking between Advance Wars and the second one, which I think was Black Hole Rising. But like, it's also one of like the best Game Boy Advance games out there. Like you have to play it. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Great turn-based
own,
strategy game.
I only own 2.
That might be on top 10 lists I should play before I kick the bucket.
Daniel.
Is it my turn again?
It is.
All right. Well, I've only got 4 because one of the next ones, Shadow of the Colossus, was already spoken about. So the one after that on this list for me is Valkyria Chronicles.
Ooh.
Thank you.
It was one of the first games I picked up for PS3, not knowing really anything about it. I just bought it on a whim because the only game I had for PS3 was Metal Gear Solid 4. And I sunk a lot of time into that game. It's a fantastic tactics game. I thought it was a little easy to break with some of the classes being really strong, but the story in it was amazing. The way they told the story with you'd like open a book and pick like a picture, and it would keep like this like border around all the cutscenes to look like it was played through like an old movie. It was just really well done. I picked up the HD one, of course, on PS4. I have not had a chance to replay it, but I plan to. Maybe next year. Let's see. Next game, we've got breaking up a series here because it's difficult you can't put all 3 of them on here, but Xenosaga 3. I would say Xenosaga 1, but 3 is definitely the best game out of the 3 of that series. 1 being just that it was new. It definitely is rough around the edges, still held up, but 3 kind of like perfected everything that they had done with the previous 2 games, brought it all together, and kind of wrapped it up really well, because it was unfortunately the last game that we got out of what was supposed to be a 6-game series. But you can pick up the 3rd one and just play it from there. It has like a synopsis thing that tells you everything, so highly recommend that one for the gameplay. Next one, Castlevania 4. Has to be on this list. You guys know how much I like playing that game. Of all the Castlevania games that I've played, it still holds up, especially for me, being that I've had it since I was very young and played it a lot, and just really enjoy the angle, like the way you can use the whip in that one seems to be different than any other ones. You never got the whipping at diagonal angles or up or down or whatever. In like only like one or two other ones, you actually got that, I think. And then we have Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
My hero.
Far and away my favorite Zelda game. It was just amazing what they did with everything in that game. Like all the bosses were really good. All the world was built really well. I mean, it's all just great. There's a reason there's a game, I don't remember what it's called, but there's a game coming out that looks almost exactly the same as that one. Like, there's a reason they just, like, remade that. So, I'm, highly recommend that for anyone. Go play right now. No
Yeah,
excuses.
absolutely.
They've remade
Such intelligent dungeon design. Like,
Yeah.
so good looking. It's like the perfect difficulty, perfect length.
Mhm.
It is a best in show.
Well, that was a little quick, but that's my 5 for this bunch. So I guess we're back to Noah again for the next 5.
I'm so happy you chose A Link to the Past. Because the Zelda game I put on my list is Breath of the Wild.
Oh.
I figure Steve has Ocarina of Time, so I'll take Breath of the Wild.
I'm not gonna give any spoilers on my list, but you'll be surprised to maybe not see some things.
Uh-oh.
Nick, please. Anyway, in terms of open world, I think Breath of the Wild is the best. Best open world anything I've ever played. It's in that group of games where it's like could be the best Zelda game, which is all Zelda games except for maybe 2. It's just so good. It's so like when people talk about it, they're like, oh, it's like he made the first one, but in the 3D space, like he always wanted to, and it feels right. It feels like that's what happened. It's just like this big explorable world. You're given like a main story, but you're not given like side missions, and you don't have like a mini map and all these like different green triangles and red squares you have to go explore. You just happen upon stuff, and it's wonderful. Yeah.
There's so much exploration in that game, and it seems like there's always like some new interaction or some new location to discover. Like the feeling of uncovering something new happens so often and so strongly that it is like on the next level in terms of delivering on that specific type of experience. And I was listening to another podcast recently, and they were talking about something that I had never really stopped to think about. And that's the Breath of the Wild doesn't have like a home base or a location that you return to craft or to upgrade or things like that. And so since there's no like central hub that you work out of and then back towards, you just feel like this drifter in the world. Like you're coming across locations and environments that other people or other things live in, but you're always just passing through them, and like you're almost not looking for a specific location. You're just like looking to see what you can find next, which I can't think of any other game that I've played that has that same feel in terms of its like world navigation.
That's pretty true. I did go back to Kakariko a lot because like that's where I knew all this, where I could find everything easily. But it was never like I had to go back there. It was just like I need to cook stuff instead of finding
just made
something.
it your home base.
Yeah, like I did it naturally. But yeah, it was a tough call for the Zeldas.
You didn't go back to your house?
No, I didn't. Not until like way later in the game, at least. I mostly used Kakariko for everything. But yeah, it was really tough to choose between Zeldas because they're all like grade A, 99 out of 100 games. And I chose this one because I figured like Ocarina of Time is the easy choice. And I felt like Breath of the Wild captures more than one Zelda within its game. So that's why I chose that one. Next up is Earthbound.
Good one.
I figured that would be on somebody's list.
That game was actually Super Mario World until 2 minutes before the podcast. Where I'm like, I can't believe I don't have Earthbound on this list. I chose Super Mario World and Super Mario 64, mostly because Super Mario World introduced Yoshi and a lot of my favorite is Super Mario 3, but World, I feel like, is better for the everyman to play before they die. But anyway, Earthbound. It's a game where you play as some kids with telekinetic powers, and the game has jokes and personality and an interesting battle system where when you take damage, you don't just immediately take the damage. You have like a counter rolling down, and you have all like actual real life time in order to heal it back up before it hits 0. So you're able to like save yourself. Yeah, there's like tongue-in-cheek jokes. It's just a good game, good RPG.
An RPG set in the modern world, or a replica
modern.
of the modern world. Yeah, like late 90s, but like not fantasy, not medieval, not futuristic or steampunk. Like grounded in what is essentially reality, which is very uncommon and cool that they basically hit the nail right on the head first try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just a little kid with a baseball cap and a baseball bat.
If you want money, you wait for your dad to deposit in your bank account.
But yeah, I figured this one is actually, like, if I was doing it numerically, this one would be farther up on my list. It's such a staple of a video game for gamers that you should play it before you die. Next up on my list is my personal favorite game of all time, Mega Man X.
I knew it. I didn't put it on my list because of that.
Yeah,
same.
Thank you. If you were to play any Mega Man game, if anyone was like, hey, you should go play a Mega Man game and get back to me, it should be Mega Man X. It is one of very few games I would consider an actual perfect game. It's the perfect length, it's the perfect difficulty, the movement feels good, the bosses are fun to fight, you have just enough collectibles, you have different ways of farming items if you ever need to. There's multiple ways to beat bosses. It's just so good. So many secrets. It's the best video game, okay? And it was hard to pick this one and Mega Man X2 because other people say Mega Man X2 is the best game because it improves on the first one so much. But I would say this is so much the perfect game that this is the one you should choose. So yeah, Mega Man X, best video game. Play it before you die, please. Next on my list is something Steve did not put down, but close. I picked Persona 5.
Wow.
Yeah, I never even finished it. And
wow.
Yeah.
Loser.
I did the thing where I got really far and then I stopped playing because I think if I finish it, that means it's done and I can't go back and play it for some reason. And then not finishing it gives me a reason to go back and play it. I think that's what happens there.
I mean, I've done that a few times with other games,
so
I can't fault you for that.
I'm going to assume Dan picked Persona 3 if he didn't pick Persona 5. If Dan doesn't have a Persona game on his list, I don't know what's wrong with him. I loved 5, and I'm going to love it when I go back and play it too and finish it. They made so many improvements to like what the issues with 3 and 4 were that it's just so right. It's so good. The combat is, I wouldn't say is it easier or is it not that bad? It just feels less punishing. They added some elements so that you can take enough people with. It's hard to say it. So you have a team of 4, and there are also 4 basic elements. And whenever you get hit with your weakness, you get knocked down, and the enemy gets another turn. Which means your characters can get one shot a lot. But if you know you're gonna fight like lightning elementals or whatever in Persona 5, you can take people without lightning weakness and get through it pretty easily. That's what I really liked about the combat. It was so stylized and pretty, and it was just really, really good. If you pick 3, 4, or 5, I'm not going to blame you for Personas. Those are all masterpieces. But I feel like 5 is more easily accessible in terms of at least difficulty, and that's the one I picked, okay?
It is the one you picked.
I picked it. And then, last but not least, of my next 5, I also picked a Final Fantasy game. And I figured Steve would pick 9, but I picked the original Final Fantasy. Nobody else?
Nope.
No?
Alright. I picked this one because essentially Final Fantasy games to me are I pick my character, or like RPGs in general. I like to pick a character, job, or class or whatever. And I'm a huge role player, so I'm gonna name my characters. Like, I think it's been a few years since I played the
You name them Butthead?
No. I played the Game Boy Advance one a few years ago, and I think I told Steve about this, but I was the warrior, Steve was the thief, Leah was my white mage, and Pat was my black mage. I named them after my party members, and I like to have stories about the people I have. And you can't do that with 6, 7, 8, and 9. Well, you sort of can, but it doesn't feel right. So, in terms of RPGs, Final Fantasy is like the most staple RPG that I would put that up there with Chrono Trigger. Like, you should definitely play both of these games before you die. And Final Fantasy is such a meaty, just it's so good. I do the same thing with Disgaea. I made Steve a warrior. I made myself a Prinny hero. This is in Disgaea 3. But I like to do that sort of stuff. And with Final Fantasy 12 where you all have named characters, and Final Fantasy 13 where there's lightning, and I guess you can rename them in different Final Fantasy games, but it just doesn't feel right. I want to be the warrior. I want to become the paladin. I want to adventure with my friends, and Final Fantasy was one of the first games where I could do that. So that's that's the end of that part of my list. So, Steve, you can go now.
Wow, so sudden.
I just want to keep it moving.
Alrighty. So next up is Uncharted 2. So I wanted to pick kind of like a modern action. I don't know how to describe it. What kind of the modern genre of game
Action
as
adventure.
Hollywood blockbusters, like huge production values, huge elaborate set pieces and interactive cutscenes and stuff. And I think Uncharted 2 does it best of any of them. I mean, The Last of Us is also pretty good, but not quite exactly the same thing. And I think that Uncharted 2 is visually like still incredible. When I first played through that game, like every new scene was just like a level of action that I hadn't really experienced playing through before. And there are tons of like standout memorable moments in that game. So if you're looking for any kind of modern action adventure game, definitely check out Uncharted 2. Right next is maybe I don't know, maybe the pick that people would expect the least. But I picked Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. So I want to know before I talk about it, has anyone played this game other than me?
I have not, but I've been meaning to. I just don't have a copy of it.
Alright, and I'm pretty sure Nick hasn't. Noah, have you?
No.
Okay. So Ghost Trick, for anyone that's not played it before, is point and click adventure / puzzle game, I guess. The story of the game is that you are killed at the beginning of the game, and your soul, like your ghost spirit, can inhabit other objects and interact with those objects in a way that they logically would interact. And you can't jump from one object to the next unless they're close enough to each other. And so it's about navigating environments by jumping in and out of objects and moving them around the screen or causing them to interact with each other in weird ways in order to ultimately solve the mystery of why you died. So in a lot of situations, you're trying to avoid other people that are critical to you figuring out why you died from dying. So you're saving people's lives as you navigate through these environments. But the story is like just an incredibly written mystery story that takes place over the course of one night. The game looks and is animated and just kind of feels really stylish in a way that no other game has. It's got almost kind of like a goofiness to it, but at the same time has a pretty genuine story. And it is just one of those games that when you play it, you're like, wow, there is nothing else like this. And it's not like aping another game's mechanics, or no other games since have really copied it. It just kind of exists as the standalone pillar of really, really good adventure, puzzle, mystery gameplay. So, I mean, if you like games like Professor Layton, or if you like games like maybe Phoenix Wright, not really so much like the exploration parts of Phoenix Wright, the pre-case, you'll really like Ghost Trick. And it's on the DS for anyone that is not aware of that. So go check it out. After that was Sonic 2, which we already covered. And so next I have Contra for the original Nintendo. And this is on my list for two reasons. One is that it is an incredible side-scrolling run-and-gun game that basically kind of is like not the first to do what it does, but sort of the best to do what it does, and is the pace car for other run and gun shooters to come after that, for other great games that followed, like Gunstar Heroes and things like that. But the other reason I put it on this list, and the reason I think people should play it, is because that Contra is kind of the game. It's kind of the de facto game that people reference back to when they want to say a game is hard. Like, people will be like, "Oh, this game's like hard, like NES hard," or "Oh, it's Contra hard." And so, I think playing through Contra, not only because it's an incredible game, but also because it gives you that context, will help you in talking to other people when they're trying to reference how hard they think a game is. I mean, it's like any other old Nintendo game where the difficulty is in that you need to learn patterns and make slow incremental progress as you fail many times in a row, but it still is helpful for people to learn that, I think. And yeah, Contra is just a good game.
It was a consideration for my list.
Yeah, of the games on this list, it's probably the one that I would be least likely to go back and play myself, but I do think it's like an important, people should play it. And then the last of this chunk I have, and this might appear on other people's lists, is Dark Souls.
Yeah, it was on mine. Dark Souls 1 specifically.
Yep, I also put Dark Souls 1 specifically. So, I really like Demon Souls, and Demon Souls was a consideration, but Dark Souls, and it makes sense that it's right next to Contra. It's kind of like the modern version of what people consider a difficult game to be, and it was so influential in how it's like often imitated, never replicated in terms of its storytelling. Everything in Dark Souls just like oozes this kind of like creepy, but also like oddly mysterious or charming, like level of influence over you. And it doesn't ever outwardly explain anything to you, but at the same time is still really fun to explore and try to learn more about the world, learn more about the story, and then see more and more of the environments. Plus, the locations that you visit are all incredibly diverse. The way the world links back around each other and like utilizes its space is really well done, and the combat is just awesome. I mean, there's a reason that so many people obsess over this game, and there's a million lore videos on YouTube, and everybody constantly talks about other games being the Dark Souls of blank. And it's probably pretty rare that someone wouldn't have played it, but man, it is definitely, both because it's an incredible game and because it's important in kind of the history of games. It's a good one to play. And that's it. So we will toss it over to Nick once again.
Well, a spiritual mate of my first game has already made the list a couple times. But I went with Ico. Or Eco. I don't know how people say it. I always called it Ico. And oh god, it is such a good game for a lot of the reasons that Shadow of the Colossus was a good game. Like it was one of the first PS2 titles. And so like we weren't as gamers probably used to the power and flash of the PlayStation 2. And so like you got to immerse yourself in this like weird creepy castle and just explore it. And you weren't alone for a lot of the time. You were with Yorda. But I haven't played a lot of things that have really captured that like atmosphere those Ico and like Shadow of the Colossus really give out. And it's just a really good puzzle game too. Like there were a lot of moments in that game where I had to scratch my head and think for a while. Just So good.
Ico was on my list in my last 5 games that I haven't mentioned so far. And I agree with everything you said. I actually like it more than Shadow of the Colossus, but it's like the way that the game uses the environment for puzzle solving and exploration was so different from anything else at the time. Like playing a game that had no HUD and you solved puzzles just by navigating the environments you were in, not like, oh, move these blocks around or, catch 5 widgets and bring them to this location. It was just like, oh, you see that brick outcrop up there? Oh, well, you got to go climb over on that brick outcrop. And then, oh, this wall crumbles down. Oh, what's behind this crumbling wall? I'll just push through these bricks. Like it was the first time, I think, at least in my experience, at the start of the PS2 era, where the environment you were in became something for you to explore and use rather than for the environment to just be the boundaries of the space you played in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That was something very new. I want to say, too, that the game didn't really have a lot of music.
Very, very little, but it did have really good music when you got to the couches to save.
So good.
And so it was like the save points became, it's kind of like Resident Evil where the piano music plays when you're saving. The couches became kind of like the safe haven in this otherwise empty castle because it would play that really comforting music. But you're right, otherwise it was all just kind of ambient, hollow noise.
Yes,
like I started playing The Last Guardian. I didn't get it very far, but I'm excited to experience that too.
Also very good.
All right, the next one up for me is actually the only entry in this series I've played, which some people might find surprising, but I picked Resident Evil 4.
That's a good choice.
That is a good choice.
It's the only one I've ever played, and was so good.
Well, you picked a good one.
Yeah.
It's one of the few that I've played too, to be honest.
And it, like, graphically, I feel like even the graphics would hold up pretty well today. One of the best GameCube titles. What do
also,
you want?
Another one on my list.
I just like the shooting feel and like the exploring feels really good. It's got a cool story. It's fast paced. It has like really fun bosses. The like upgrading your weapons is really cool, and like upgrading your attaché cases and stuff. Like, it's got it's like got collectibles and stuff too, which is cool.
A lot of like little attention to detail type things, like little quirky things you can do in certain situations. And I mean, I've said this about multiple games before too, but it was another just like kind of like Arkham Asylum, where it just like pioneered, this is how all third-person shooters are going to play for the rest of time, is this over-the-shoulder camera style. And it did it like perfectly right out of the gate. So
you should play that game before you die.
Oh yeah.
Next up, Donkey Kong 64.
Now, is this a list of just top 20 games to play before you die, or the top 20 games that when you play them you want to die?
Like Donkey Kong 64 is an amazing game. Like, it is a wonderful platformer. There are so many things to collect. I didn't realize until this year and watching some speedruns how broken it was. But like, if you're playing a game and you're not trying to break it, like, a lot of times you won't ever find those weird glitches. So
yeah.
I guess one of the flaws is that it's a really long game.
Yeah.
Like, it's like there's a lot of content in this like little cartridge.
It's probably like a 30-hour game just to get through, not even to collect everything.
Yeah, and it's cool though because like you get to play as all the different Kongs. They each have like different combat styles. You have to use all the Kongs to like get all the collectibles and get through all the levels. It's just a really solid, amazing platformer, 3D platformer. It came out in the same era that like Super Mario 64 did, and I'm not gonna say it was better because it wasn't, but it was one of the greats. And so that one I think everyone should play at some point. And I don't think they really did much else with Donkey Kong in the future. Like that was kind of like a weird standalone game. Like there's the Donkey Kong Country games, which are like 2D. But...
Yeah, I think that was it. He's basically always been 2D except for that one entry.
So next up is The World Ends With You.
Another good choice.
This is probably the only DS game I played where I gave a crap about the stylus and like motion controls. Like, because you have to like swipe on the screen.
You have to.
Yeah, you like. You have to, but it doesn't feel gross, you know? Like it doesn't feel terribly forced on you. Like it's how the game is played. That's how you do it.
I was gonna say, I think it's kind of forced on you in the fact that you have to fight with it, but it's done in a good way that doesn't make it hurt.
Yeah, and like it doesn't seem like why can't I just use my D-pad and the A buttons? Like the battle style makes sense. But the game just has so stylish. Like I think it was kind of meant to be, but like one of the things usually you like buy new clothes and buttons.
And the clothes you wear affect your stats in more than just like straight upgrades. Like if that's fashionable, it's better.
And it had like really good music.
Oh yeah, it had a great music track.
Yeah, like that is not a game you're gonna play with the music off while you're listening to others. Like that's a game you definitely play with your music turned up. And it's hard. It's like a hard game too. You can kind of adjust the difficulty in game to like make it harder or easier depending. There's like a slider in the menus or something, but
yeah, I definitely had to turn it down a couple times. Admittedly,
I did too. It's okay.
Some of those bosses were hard.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was like the bosses were really cool, and I don't really think there's been a game like it. It's very unique. Was it Tetsuya Nomura, the like Final Fantasy guy? Did he do the character designs for that one? Or was it somebody else?
I don't actually remember.
Either way, very solid game, cool story, fun gameplay, good music, very solid. The last one in my chunk is a personal favorite that I played a ton, and this is Dragon Age Origins.
Good choice, Nick. I agree. It's not on my list, but it should have been.
It's a good game.
It's so good. It's like a Western style RPG for the PC.
Yeah, it uses D&D roles, doesn't it? Unlike the back end.
Yep, I think might be slightly different like mechanics, but it's kind of essentially how it works. It's kind of slow paced. Especially if you end up playing like some of the
high difficulties.
I was just gonna say the other games in the series, they kind of crank up the speed of the combat.
Yeah, well, I mean, the second one was an action RPG. So...
And so, and one of the cool things was the strategy behind the battles. You can pause the battles at any time, and you're running around with like a party of 4, and so you can, if you're playing on one of the harder difficulties, you are pausing all the time to micromanage your people, because it's that hard, and you need to make sure everything is going perfectly, which is the cool part of the game. And the game did have a built-in, like, you could customize the AI for your party members, so you didn't always have to be micromanaging them. And if you put the time into that, you could actually make some like really good and solid like builds for your party that would function really well most of the time. And so like playing through like the normal difficulties, you can tweak that and bring the difficulty down for yourself. But that game had a really good story, really good characters, lots of gameplay, lots of side quests. The world is like, I got really into the lore for that game. Like, it's one that
Yeah, they built the world really well.
Yeah, like, so you can get sucked in pretty deep. It's very medieval and swords and dragons and stuff, but I felt like they had a good spin on the medieval world with the like main threat in the world. They're called Darkspawn, and they're like weird monsters that have risen from like the depths of the world. You know, there's other things in games like that, like orcs and stuff like that, but these, I felt, were fairly unique in a lot of ways. And so yeah, I think Dragon Age Origins should be on everyone's list. So Dan, chunk number 3.
Chunk number 3. Well, this one included Dark Souls for me, so that's already out the window. It also has a Mega Man game in it, but not the one that Noah talked about. This Mega Man game is Mega Man 0 for GBA.
The first one?
Whoa!
I mean, I couldn't remember which. Like, it's been a while since I played them all, so one of them. I don't remember which one was the better ones. I remember the last 2 being easier than the first 2, but I thought they were all good. I liked them all anyway.
They're good.
And if you're gonna play one, you may as well start at the beginning, the story arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it was a good throwback for me to the like Mega Man X stuff, because previously the GBA games were like Battle Network, which were also fantastic games, but very different than just the side-scroller shooting kind of Mega Man style. And it did a good job of capturing that, and it added the extra difficulty of like the elf sprite things that if you didn't like eat them basically, then you didn't have as many like power-ups, but you got like a better score at the end. So there were added that extra layer of challenge, and I really liked that. I never did manage to make it through the whole game with not using any elves, but I got close. Next one would be Xenoblade Chronicles, the first one, not Xenoblade X or anything like that. It definitely brought. It was one of the 3 like you must play these RPGs on the Wii. And I jumped on the bandwagon late because I missed the game release. It just kind of snuck by me and I never saw it. But I did play it, and I pulled a Noah, and I got all the way to the end of it, and I'm like, I'll come back to this. I'm gonna finish this later. I don't want to end this just yet. But the story was riveting. The gameplay was really cool. If you really wanted to, you could bust it with the way you could there was like gear socketing and stuff, and you could buff your gems really high and do crazy crit damage and stuff because it had like a kind of like an MMO style combat where like your abilities had cooldowns and you could position yourself to the side or behind or in front to do more damage depending on what moves and characters you were using. The the cast of characters was great. Liked all of them, both the villains and the heroes. And it's got except Riki. I don't like that little furball. I don't think anybody does though.
The Riki Pond?
Riki Pond. Mm-hmm.
There's whole villages of Rikis.
The hero pond. Oh gosh, it's so awful. Definitely my least favorite part of the game was grinding all those side quests with those little furballs.
That's another game where the sense of scale is just insane. Like every environment is just this huge, incredible, sweeping, beautiful vista, and every environment looks different from the last, and always has really good fitting music.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, the soundtrack is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good choice.
Next one I've got here is Wild Arms 2. Steve may remember this from one of my top favorite lists.
Mm-hmm.
I've only played 1, 2, and 4. Or no, actually, I've only played 2, 3, and 4, excuse me. I have 1, I tried playing it, it crashed constantly on my PS3. Now that I have a PS2, I can try and play it again. But 2 was the first one that I played, and I really liked how it started off with, there's 3 different characters, you have to play through each of their intro chapters, and then at the end of their intro chapters, they all meet up, and they're playing, they're all in a party then at that point. And the graphics are definitely dated at this point. But I did like the battle system and stuff was your typical turn-based RPG, but I'm trying to remember now, but there's different you could equip different bullets on the main character to make his abilities do different things. And there weren't really any characters that were replaced by other ones. They all kind of had their own unique abilities, and you could use any party. I think you always had to use the main character, but you could mix it up, and if you liked the way one guy played, you're just gonna use him the whole game, and you'd still do okay. You weren't forced to use anybody. Just like in your typical RPG kind of thing. And this last one I put on here, and I think it's gonna fit into that second category that Steve brought up a little while ago when we were talking about Donkey Kong. And that game is Pac-Man 2. The Adventures of Pac.
Uh-oh.
Because you just have to play it to experience it. Just like Noah did not that long ago.
I didn't experience it. It experienced me.
It is a game for the Super Nintendo. You may know Pac-Man with his, going through his maze, eating his pellets. But this is a point-and-click adventure game for the Super Nintendo where you used a slingshot to tell Pac-Man what to do. And it has, it's special. I managed to beat it, and I want other people to experience it, so you should definitely play it. At some point.
You don't.
The memes.
I had to throw one in there. I had to.
It's true.
So that's that chunk for me, and we'll throw it over to Noah for his last 5.
All right. So, as some of you may have noticed from listening to the rest of this podcast, some of my stuff has already been mentioned, like Super Mario 64 and Super Metroid. I have 3 left. And unlike Nick with Donkey Kong 64, I chose Donkey Kong Country 2 because I'm a smart guy.
Electric Blue.
I think this one's better than Donkey Kong 64.
To be fair, the only reason I couldn't pick a country game is because I haven't played any.
Oh, you should remedy that. This one has good platforming, good everything, good music. It's just a very well-polished A+ game.
I still hate that Poison Tower. It's my least favorite level.
I don't remember what you're talking about, but I'm sure it's garbage. It's been a long time since I've actually played this. I should go back and play it now.
You should.
But yeah, it's definitely worth playing. I like it over the original Donkey Kong Country. And I don't remember much about 3, but 2 is definitely where it's at. And moving right along, because this has been a long one. Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Whoa.
Thought this would turn up.
Yeah, I figured it was coming up somewhere.
I did not play this one for a long time. I'd played the Game Boy Advance Castlevanias before this. I think I played a DS one or two before this. I played the original and number 2 before this. And
Fun fact, I still haven't played it.
it's like everyone says it's the best one. And then I played it and I'm like, this is probably not the best one. Everyone's probably thinking nostalgia. But then you go back and you play it and it's the best one. And you're like, oh, I guess everyone was right.
I guess they're right.
It holds up to what everyone says. It is the best Castlevania. This one is a Castleroid where it's very explory and it's not just levels and side-scrolling. But yeah, it holds up, and I won't spoil the ending for you. Just play it for yourself before you die. So I guess the last one on my list is Star Fox 64. I used to rent this game a lot, and then I owned this game, and then I don't know what happened, and then I borrowed this game. This is the best iteration of Star Fox. I was gonna say StarCraft. The dogfighting is really cool. It's cool how they have some of your friends flying in front of you with enemies behind them, and they're like, "Help me!" And you gotta stop them. They're gonna kill me. And then if you don't, they actually blow up, and you miss them for a couple levels. There's different difficulty paths, and based on which level you go to is more difficult than the other ones. There's different characters you meet, like Bill. I remember Bill the most. But yeah, game's a lot of fun. Go play it before you die. And I believe that's my 20. So Steve, you're up.
Alrighty. Well, it is kind of clear that Nick and I grew up together because the bottom 5 I have, 4 of which have already been spoken for, all of them mentioned by Nick. So
I'm so sorry.
Perfect Dark was one of them. Ico was another one. Silent Hill 2 and Resident Evil 4. So we're really just down to
Rip Steve's list.
my last one to recommend. And this is one that I knew wouldn't be on anybody else's list, and it's a fairly recent addition to mine. But the last game that I'm going to say that everyone can play or should play before they die, find a way to play it somehow. Don't necessarily pay the price that you would have to pay for it, but however you can play it, is Snatcher on the Sega CD.
Oh, that game. Okay.
So Dan mentioned Valhalla earlier and how good that game was. And Snatcher is very much the template and the game style and presentation that Valhalla is based on. Snatcher is kind of like the seed that grew into those types of games. So it's a visual novel kind of adventure game. It's a lot of reading text and moving between areas and trying to like find and use items in the right location to solve puzzles and move the mystery forward. It is the first game by Hideo Kojima before Metal Gear Solid on the 3D systems. And yeah, it's just the music is great. It's got like an incredible like how do I say it? Like pacing. Like the game moves at a really good rate and there's always an like interesting event happening or some new hook in the story or some twist. And it's just so different from anything else that I think was coming out at the time, and there aren't a lot of games like that that come out now. And so there were a lot of kind of like visual novel type games that I thought about putting on here. Like 999 is a really good one. Danganronpa is a really good series. But I went with Snatcher because it kind of has that legacy to it and was kind of the seed that a lot of these other games would start to develop off of. So yeah, I would say go check out Snatcher. And that's all I have. So it's back to Nick to hopefully have more than one game remaining.
I have 5 games remaining.
Oh.
One that I'm surprised hasn't come up yet. But that's the last one, so that'll be the most anticipated. The first one is Metal Gear Solid in my chunk, and I picked the first one.
Good choice. I also would have accepted number 3.
Numbers, it was contentious in my heart. I played 2 first. I never owned a PS1, and so I was kind of behind the times, and I had to play catch up once I got my PS2. But even playing 2 first, which by all means was a very polished, fluid game, you got to play as a handsome guy. When I went back and played the first game, it still played so good. There are few games that are as good as Metal Gear. And so I just had to pick that one. The bosses are really cool, as is in all Metal Gear Solid games, but it's definitely a classic that you gotta play. You definitely will miss out. Even if you play 3 first, it's, if you don't know who some of the characters are, you're kind of missing nice Easter eggs, or not Easter eggs, but references to the old game. You're not gonna know who Revolver Ocelot is. Who's that guy? Mm-hmm. Or the Lale Lule Lo. And so it's very good. The next game in my list is also a PS1 game that I played after another one in the series. Well, kind of in the series, but it was Xenogears. Xenogears is in that same Xeno universe, and I believe it takes place long afterward.
Correct.
But it's just a very solid RPG. You get to pilot mechs, big giant robots, which is really fun. The characters are cool. It has a pretty I would say the battle system is pretty standard, but
I don't know about that. The combo thing was not standard in anything else I played.
I suppose that's true. But I was just thinking the kind of turn-based,
yeah, I mean it's a turn-based thing, but the punching is done by pushing certain button combos that were eventually learned or taught by other things.
It was a good battle system.
It was.
Yeah. And it had a really good story.
That turned into a book on the second disc.
It's such a good, unexpectedly good game. And I would imagine for many years, in between when that came out and the Xeno games came out, I would guess people were like, "Oh, I need more of this series." And then they came out with Xenosaga, and those are also super good.
Yes.
The third game in this chunk is another RPG. This one was for the PS2, and it is Suikoden 3.
Oh yeah.
Like, this game is so good. I haven't played 2 yet. I played 1. I've heard 2 is really good. But 3 was the first one I had played in the series. And again, just a very solid RPG. It's really long, and you get to collect all in the Suikoden games. I think it's 108 stars of destiny, or stars of something they call them. So you get to like meet that many characters, and they are either people that you can have in your party to fight with, or they'll be like people who can live at your castle and be like merchants and stuff. It had a really fun battle system. It had a cool system, or a cool type of battle every once in a while that you would do, where it was like a large scale battle where you had like moving pieces, almost like a board game.
I would say it's similar to like Fire Emblem or whatever, you know?
Yeah, like there was like counters and different kinds of units. And so there would be points in the story where you're like trying to take something back or defend something. And so it switched things up a little bit. It was a really gorgeous game when it came out on the PS2. And I still feel like it would hold up and look really neat today. So that's Suikoden 3. The next choice on my list was unexpected for me, even to myself.
You looked at your list and you're like, "Whoa, how'd that get there?"
And this is an original Xbox game.
Oh.
And it's another game in like the stealth genre. And I feel like it's one some people might overlook. And it's the Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah.
Escape from Butcher Bay.
Whoa.
This game you play as Riddick from like the Pitch Black and Chronicle Riddick movies, and you're put in prison on a planet, and you just are trying to escape. And so you progress through the game, and you have to be sneaky, and you like start off with just like talking to inmates and like getting your first shiv and trying to get into brawls and get into secret areas. And eventually you get guns and can ride in like these big like mining mechs or something. But the game played really nice, and the stealth mechanics were really fun and fluid, and like felt really good. Like hiding in shadows actually helped. It seemed like. It was like a really impressive looking game as well. Like the graphics were top notch.
Yeah, it could have been a 360 game back in the era of the original Xbox. It was something to see.
And it's maybe one of the games where you probably could have like brawled your way through, but why would you do that? It's taking away some of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last game on my list, is, I still haven't actually picked one out in my heart. But nobody's mentioned a Pokemon game yet.
Oh, I'm so glad you covered it so that I didn't have to. I made a hard cut with Pokemon not putting it on the list.
And so there are 4 games that I'm like having a tough time. I want to pick Fire Red and Leaf Green, just because like if you're gonna send people back to play old games, let's give them the nice remakes. But the Gold and Silver games just were so good as well. And I don't know how I felt about the remakes on the 3DS or on the DS, Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
I think that was just DS, and I thought they were good. I liked the remix.
And so I think the ones I'm gonna land on though, I think everyone should play
Pokemon Snap.
White and Black.
Oh.
White and Black was the first entry in the series where they forced you. I say that it sounds bad, but it's actually a really great thing where they force you to use all of the new 150 Pokemon they invented for that generation.
Yeah, before it unlocked before you could get the old ones.
Yep, like you had to beat the Elite Four before you could do that, and so it was. You're not gonna be going through cave and be like, well, I've seen Geodude before and I know he's good, like because he turns into Golem. Like I'm just gonna get a Geodude. Like no, you had to catch the silly ones you get.
You set limits on yourself. You don't let yourself catch the old Pokemon if they're available. Only use the new ones.
I usually do that anyways, but it was cool in this game too because like you didn't even have the option. Like they filled all those holes in with new ones. So
it's true.
Like it was just great, and like it had a pretty good story for a Pokemon game. Like you're not playing Pokemon for the story. Let's be honest. I think it was the first game I EV trained into. It was such a great game. And
EV training. Done with that.
So go play Pokemon Black or White.
Yeah. or any Pokemon game.
Or any.
Black and White in particular are very
Sun and Moon, X and Y, like they're all good.
They're all good.
Doesn't matter. They're all good.
All right, Dan, round us out.
Okay, well, my top 5. All right, so we've got Tales of Symphonia. There it is, team. It was I'd originally played Tales of Destiny when I borrowed it from a friend of mine, and then I kind of forgot about it, and then I bought Tales of Symphonia on GameCube, and as I was playing, I'm like, man, these items sure look familiar. And the character art and everything, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the same series. And that was when I first got into the Tales stuff. And I probably played that game through 3, 4, or 5 times, within the first year that I had it. So the story was great. All the characters were really good. The fact that you could swap out a certain character halfway through the story by making certain choices, I liked that option. I thought that was cool. A lot of extra stuff to do with the cursed weapons and grinding out all the titles and just so much to do. Definitely one to play. Next is Final Fantasy IV. There's my Final Fantasy. I was always a big fan of 4. I played back when I emulated some stuff. After playing 7 and 8, I went and I found the emulated versions of 4, 5, and 6. And so I got to experience butts in Final Fantasy V.
Yeah.
That mistranslation. But 4 really stuck with me, and I own, I think, every iteration of it now. Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, PSP, or maybe I don't own the PSP one. I think I have the DS one sitting around somewhere too. I have it on Steam, which I think is the same as the DS version. So I played it a lot, because I've played all of those at least to the moon, every time. So really like that one a lot. Next one, Persona 3. There it is. You guessed it.
I figured.
Yep. First Persona game I ever played. After having played 4 and 5 as well, I still will stick to 3 as being my recommendation. I feel like it has really, really good character development through their social links versus the other two. I'm not saying the others don't. I just think this one did it in a better way because they kind of like the characters better themselves. It's not just like a random side arc, side story for the character, and it kind of reflects on that. Next one is Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, or as we know it in America, just Fire Emblem GBA. The Roy or Eliwood Hector Lynn game. First one I ever played the ever living crap out of it. So many times that I never quite finished it, but I got 85 or 90% of all the support conversations in the game, which is a ridiculous amount of them because you can only pick one A support per playthrough per character. So I had to do a lot of sitting around waiting for people to talk to each other on those maps. But I thought the map design was really good. Don't go to the Fire Emblem community because they think all the games are terrible, so just don't even talk to them. But being able to choose like Hector mode or Eliwood mode, and it still had the same like general story, but they each had their own unique maps, and you got your units in kind of a different order, and all that was really cool. So yeah, that is my Fire Emblem recommendation. And last, but very much not least, is Legend of Dragoon.
Ooh.
Mm.
Very good choice.
Yeah. Yep. That one has a great soundtrack. The story's really good. The combat system was very unique, at least to me, and I still haven't really seen it done anywhere else. Where like you have your attack combos, and they have like a white square that'll zoom in, and you hit the X at the right time, or square, or maybe it was circle, I don't remember which, to depending on what was happening, and if you completed your combo, you got big damage, and you'd get like spirit points towards your Dragoon transformations and stuff as you did those combos. So a lot of fun doing that, and I usually play that game at least once a year as well. Just I have it on PSN now, so I can play it on my Vita. Play it on the go. But of course, I own I think 2 copies of it now on PS1. So highly recommend. I'm assuming all 3 of you have played that game.
Yes.
Love
You
that
haven't.
game.
I'm gonna be sad.
I actually haven't. I've seen a lot of it played.
That's your project for the next year. We'll play it.
Okay.
But yeah, and I guess we haven't really talked about it much, but I had like 3 that were like real close to making it on the list. I won't go into depth, but Metroid Fusion, Witcher 3, and a Phoenix Wright game.
I was surprised StarCraft didn't make it.
StarCraft is in my honorable mentions, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a RTS player, so it was nowhere on my radar.
Bayonetta is another
like
one in my honorables.
Warcraft 3, I'm surprised.
Yep.
We talked about that one.
Yep.
Dan said WoW earlier. I was also thinking WoW.
Yeah, but that's hard to say because you kind of have to play that one when it was in its heyday to really get the feel and experience of it from like vanilla forward, like seeing as the game evolved into like the second expansion, I'd say is when it peaked, and then it's been steadily declining since then. But that's why it didn't make it onto my list.
Yeah, I was a ravenous WoW player, and I haven't played like the last 2 expansions.
So that's my list.
So that's a pretty solid list of 65 or so, I think, looking at the final list. But hopefully, anyone listening at least either discovered or feels a little more inclined to check out a couple of these. I'm sure a lot of these most people have heard of, but I'm assuming most people have a few of these in there that they haven't played yet, and this will help nudge them in the right direction.
Hope so.
You know, I'm looking at the duplicates, and I don't think any are duplicated more than just twice.
I think you're right.
That's
Shadow of the
interesting.
Colossus was on everyone's list, wasn't it? Or no, it wasn't on Nick's list.
We had 2 shadows and 2 ecos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Dang.
True diversity here on the Bideo.
Indeed.
Yeah, but I think we're
Being
gonna
able
end
to-
it, right?
Yeah, we'll touch on games we've been playing next week or sometime in the near future, and then we'll come back soon. I don't know exactly when, but soon with kind of what our bucket list games are, the ones that we feel like we need to get to.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's going to be fun.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, team.